everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And today is, it's another day with a very special guest here on the Feeling Seen pod. A woman with such a varied career, a depth and breadth of entertainment experience that is so formidable. Perhaps if you were a theater fan during the original run of Gypsy, you saw her on stage with Ethel Merman, you did. If you are a fan of films, you have seen her in movies like About, Schmidt, and In and Out, and yes, Nebraska, for which she was nominated for an Academy Award. The movie The Humans, you will see her in the upcoming movie Thelma. June Squibb, what else could we possibly say to summarize your career before we get started for the people here today? You've worked a ton in television.
I think, what you've said, I think I've done a little bit of it all. I've certainly done TV, film, and every kind of stage you can do. Broadway, off Broadway, off Broadway, everything.
I think one of the things I read in an interview of yours was that when you started out doing theater, you were getting a lot of like those comedian parts in musicals. Mm-hmm. And in an effort to get to do straight plays, you stopped taking musical roles because you couldn't quite make the jump, and that off Broadway was what enabled you to make that transition into plays.
It was off Broadway and regional theater.
Okay.
Doing both sort of put me in another category all at once.
Do you find that having worked in so many sectors of acting at this point, is that kind of like difficulty pigeonholing, does that sort of transcend whatever medium you're working in, like having to go off Broadway and regional to be like, no, I can do plays as well? Like, is there that kind of like fixing on to an identity of you no matter what you're doing?
I think people feel comfortable knowing that they know you in a certain way. And I think that everybody knew me as a musical theater performer, comedian, basically. And so I think I had to say stop and let me do something different for you.
Well, that's I'm looking forward to how we feed into your character choice, which we will get to in a second. But that's it's a challenging enough kind of fortitude and bravery to trust that the work will come in entertainment, let alone if you're going to make a jump from what you are known for to something different. Has that... do you still kind of feel, or sort of, when was the last time you felt that sense of like, doing something different is going to put it on the line for me, but it's a risk I need to take?
Oh, gosh. I think Glee, when I did Glee, the television show Glee.
Burned out ends of smoky days, the stale cold smell of morning, a street lamp dies, another night is over, another day is dawning.
I had sung in every kind of stage situation, but I had never sung in front of a camera. And it was different. It was much more technical. You had to deal technically with the singing much more than on stage. So I think that was something that sort of, I don't say it scared me, but I certainly had to think twice while doing it. And but I think it was worth it.
Well, we're gonna get to Thelma, which I love, and is going. I can tell you is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year at the conclusion of 2024. That and The Beekeeper are going to be right up there next to each other. Your Beekeeper and Jason Statham's Beekeeper are going to be right up there next to each other. But I want to talk about the character that you brought for us to discuss today that you felt really connected to, which is your character Kate in Nebraska.
Yeah.
People don't you understand?
He always did have a nice voice. It's the only nice thing about that bastard.
He's all right.
All right. Did you know that he was always trying to get in my bloomers?
Jesus, Mom, was the whole town trying to seduce you?
These boys grow up staring at the rear ends of cows and pigs. It's only natural that a real woman will get them chafing their pants.
Mom, please don't talk about that kind of stuff right before we eat.
You were always such a sensitive boy.
What was it? This
Well,
brassy old gal. What was it
old
that
gal.
got the hooks in you?
Well, when I read the script, I thought, oh, God, I want to do this. I really want to play this role. And I just felt that everything they had her doing, the scene at the cemetery. I mean, I read that and I thought, I can't believe it. Of course I want to do this. Everything about her. I mean, it's like she made sure you saw her always. Mm-hmm. And I think as a human being, she did. Mm-hmm. She did the same thing. She said, look at me. And I think that in a way, she did that for me as an actor. Because she made, I think people knew my career by then and knew, that I was a certain kind of actress. But I think that she sort of solidified everything. And being my second time with Alexander, I think that was strong for me, that he had used me twice. So I just think that it was a turning point. And of course the award season just sort of was the top of it, It just sort of made sure that everybody knew that I was there.
Where's your family?
Oh, they're over in the Catholic cemetery. Catholics wouldn't be caught dead around all these damn Lutherans. Here's Delmer, Woody's cousin. He was a drunk. One time we were wrestling and he felt me up. Grabbed a handful of boob and Woody was right there and didn't have a clue, did you, Woody?
Jesus, Mom.
Well, my goodness. I didn't know Keith White was here. When did he die? Keith White. He wanted in my pants, too, but he was so boring. See what you could have had, Keith, if you hadn't talked about weed all the time?
First of all, Nebraska is the Alexander Payne film that is about, it kind of centers around Bruce Dern, who is certain that he has just won $1 million in a sort of magazine, publishing a sweepstakes sort of thing. And if he goes to Lincoln, Nebraska, to this place, they are going to give him this $1 million that it says he has won. And so he ends up on a road trip with his son, played by Will Forte. And you are the wife of Bruce Dern's character, the kind of long-suffering wife of this aloof, alcoholic old man whose priority never was really his family. And I think that's so interesting what you say about you will see Kate when she, there are repeated points in this movie where she makes pleas about well, no one ever thinks about me. Why are you doddering all over him? He doesn't know what the hell's going on. What about me?
Have you gone bananas? Almost getting your father killed over some cockamamie pot of gold?
Mom, come here, please. Mom, look, go easy on the guy, okay? I mean, you and I both know that this is not about the money. It's about, how much longer is he going to be around? At least semi-coherently. And what's the harm in letting him have his little fantasy for just a couple more days?
You and Ross always fretting over your father. What about me? What about taking me out to see my sister in Eau Claire? Your father doesn't even know what the hell's going on around him half the time. Do you, Woody?
Do I what?
Know what's going on around you. You watch it, or that's what you're going to turn into.
And there's this sense of kind of you have put in the work for years with this individual, and the what about me sort of feels like a buildup of a lot of lost attention over the years.
Well, I think it was. I think it was for her. I guess that even for myself as an actor, I think you go through this where you feel, oh God, what I'm doing is so wonderful. Why doesn't everybody recognize it? Why doesn't everybody see it? So, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get your people around you to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you've achieved from it. And I think Kate had that trouble. No one, I mean, the women that she was involved with, or, her family, no one, I guess I just felt no one knew or had the ability to think of things the way she did.
And another interesting thing I found that, like, when I was, reading interviews of yours, like, I read a piece that you did with The Guardian back when Nebraska came out, and you talked about growing up in, like, rural Illinois in, like, the 30s and 40s, and having the sense that, like, that wasn't quite the place that you fit. But once you got into doing theater, starting out in, like, I think it was in Cleveland in, like, 1950, and then moving into Broadway in New York City, and then that was where you started to feel like, this is where I have fit all along. But even that sense of sort of, like, being bigger than the place.
I tell you, when I hit New York, it was like I breathed easier than I'd ever breathed in my life. I knew it when I hit the city.
One of the things one of the quotes that I have enjoyed most of yours that I've read from your interviews is when you said that when you thought of yourself as an actress when you were young, it was never "I will be," it was "I am." Like, it was just something you knew that you were, not that you were going to become.
Just biding my time.
So
it took a little while, but I did it. So
and you said I've read too that you said, like, you were, you had a lot of friends, you were a cheerleader, you were a majorette. It was like you were like all the things you'd expect of a girl in the 30s and the 40s. And so what was your way of sort of channeling that sort of sense of otherness in a small town when you were younger? Like, were those your sort of outlets for expression?
Well, yes. I mean, I certainly did every theater piece I could do in school and in the community. But I think one thing that kept me going, excuse me, was a sense of rightness, of things having to be right, and that I didn't want anyone to suffer. I saving people. That was it. I always had this sense that this is what I should do, I should be doing. So I would talk, all I knew how to do was talk about it. I certainly was in no position to do anything and wouldn't have known what to do anyway. But I did talk, and I can remember my friends would laugh at me, and it would be, well, June's going to be an actress anyway. It was all part of who I thought I was.
Well, I mean, all part of who you were and who you are. I mean, you were right. You were right.
I was right. Yes.
Well, and something too that like listening to. There's that part in the cemetery where Kate says in Nebraska, she's like, his mom never liked me.
Yeah.
There's Woody's mother, Sarah. She hated me. She wanted me to marry someone who milked the cows. I said, I ain't fiddling with no cow titties. I'm a city girl.
It kind of sounds like you were a little bit the same situation in growing up in Illinois.
It was, because I just felt, I remember I went into analysis in New York, and the first thing I said to the therapist was, I think I was adopted. And he started laughing, and he said, a lot of you come in and say that to me. And I did. I just felt out. Not this wasn't my place. This wasn't where I belong.
Well, what was it that felt like that sense of belonging when you got to New York? When you said you could breathe, what was it that allowed you to breathe?
I think the fact that no one cared what I did.
Yeah.
That I had a way of making my own way through all of this. And no one cared. No one was going to stop me or get in the way. It was completely up to me.
Well, and I found, too, that, like, it's so fun, the chance to get to watch movies that people suggest for this podcast and the things that they're in, and watch them really specifically considering the conversation that I'm going to have with them. And so, like, thinking of your filmography in terms of, like, this conversation, with, you've played characters whose sort of catalyzing incident is dying. Like in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, and About Schmidt, and Girls. I believe you're Hannah's grandmother. And but then in Nebraska, and then in THELMA, you have in THELMA a character who is just vivaciously alive and is going to go on an adventure, God damn it, and no one's going to stop her. And then in Nebraska, you have Kate, who's almost like furiously alive. And like, damn it, if somebody has to stay here to hold the strings of this thing together, it's going to be me. And I wanted to hear from you about characters that are just defiantly alive and playing those.
Well, I think for one thing, I understand them.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. When I read a script, and no matter what the age, you know, if they have this sense of grit, determination, I will do, you know, what's necessary, then I understand it. And I think that when you feel you understand something, it's much easier to do.
I read, talking about Nebraska, it sounds like a lot of Kate and just the surroundings of Kate in where they are in Billings, and then their life that was back in Hawthorne in Nebraska. It sounds like you identified even with just those folks from the way you grew up. And when I rewatched Nebraska, I hadn't watched it in a long time for this, and watching that just felt so much like my hometown. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. I was like,
Where
oh my
are you
God.
from?
I'm from a little town called Canby, Oregon. That's like a half an hour south of Portland, Oregon. But like famously, when my uncle was in high school, he remembers like the golf team for his high school that's a little farther away than where I grew up. They had to call off a tournament with my high school because the Canby boys had to go buck hay, and they couldn't play golf that day. Yeah, it was getting into summer, and it was end of summer, and it was harvest season.
More important.
Exactly, they had to go buck hay, so they didn't have enough boys to field the team. And like the whole like the two twin boys like Cole and Bart, when they just like can't stop razzing Will Forte about how long it's taken him to drive from Billings. I was like, this is a conversation that would happen
that you've heard.
Absolutely, with like my sister's husband, if his buddies came over, like the idea of like trying to get packed to another level if they just couldn't get over that I was in a Subaru Outback and it took me 2 days to get somewhere when it should have taken one. I was like, this is absolutely familiar to me, my upbringing. So I appreciated hearing you say that felt so familiar to you as well.
Well, I did. Yeah. I felt comfortable. And I felt comfortable in Nebraska.
In the movie.
No, in the state.
Oh, in the actual place. Yes. Okay. I was like,
shot there both about Schmidt we shot in Omaha, and in Nebraska we were in Norfolk, but it was Nebraska. I mean, so I just felt, I know these people.
Is it easier to feel comfortable going back when you know you have settled yourself outside of it? With the awareness that there was a discomfort with being there when you didn't really have a choice.
Yeah, no, I think very much so. I felt that with Chicago, because Chicago was the biggest city in Illinois, and I was there because of family. But there was something when I went back, and I was touring. I was doing the tour of Gypsy. We played there, and I all once felt like I can relax with this, and I can say, I understand this. And there's no problem. There's nothing in the way. You know, I was there doing Gypsy.
I even felt like, even when there's that bar scene where Will Forte is talking to Bruce Dern about like, how did you end up marrying Mom? And he's like, have you ever regretted it?
How did you and Mom end up getting married?
She wanted to.
You didn't?
I figured, what the hell?
Were you ever sorry you married her?
All the time. Could have been worse.
Well, you must have been in love. At least at first.
Never came up.
But when he asked, like, how did you guys even get engaged? And he's like, well, your mom wanted to. And I thought, what the hell? And I'm pretty sure that's how my parents got engaged. I think my dad literally said to my mom, Deb, I think it's time we get married. And my mom was over the moon about it, but it was basically like a what the hell. And so I watched that, I was like, wow, I didn't expect so many connective threads to my own life watching Nebraska for June Squibb.
Yeah. No, isn't that funny though? Because I think you relax. You don't have that kind of fight anymore. You know where you belong. So you can enjoy what you remember of it or what is familiar to you.
Well, and you started, you had a long stage and live performance career before you got into screen work. I think you got into that about 1990, I think was your first film. Was it Alice?
Yeah. I think I was in my 60s or 70s.
What spurred the change? Was it just like, I'm not being challenged as much over here?
I went to my agent, yes, because I was working. I went to my agent and I said, they're shooting a lot of films in New York. And I said, I know a lot of actors that are doing, roles in them. And I said, I think I should be. He said, okay. And a week later, I had an audition for Woody Allen for Alice. And the casting director was Ellen Lewis. And she was also casting Scent of a Woman.
Oh, yeah.
With Martin Press directing. And so she sent me up for that, and I got that. And then she sent me up for Scorsese's Age of Innocence, and I got that. So like, just, and she, funnily enough, Eleanor the Great, a film I just did in New York, and she was the casting director on it. And she said to Scarlett Johansson, who was directing, she said, I don't know if June will remember me or not. And I laughed when Scarlett told me. I said, Scarlett, if it weren't for her, I probably wouldn't be doing film. Of course I remember her.
That's so wonderful.
Isn't that funny, though?
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, obviously there's, you've talked about with around Nebraska too, but and with THELMA, you get, you work a lot. You're a busy woman, but there's not necessarily just an overflowing, unbelievable abundance of roles for women at your stage of your career. And so coming into kind of these precious roles like Kate and THELMA, what do you find is the thing that you sort of seek out but might not necessarily find in such abundance for women of your age? What do you wish you were seeing more of?
Well, it's the script, just reading it and seeing what this woman that they're interested in my being, what there is about her that interests me. And it can be many different things. But if it's not there, then I usually say no to the script. Because I just, sometimes I feel they want me to play the same. Yeah. It's a role that I feel I've already done. Or it's just a role that just doesn't interest me. There's nothing in it that interests me. And also, I find now, the more I work, the more I get upset with overwriting in film scripts. And that's just... that's hard to slog through because they're going to start paring it down. And sometimes they don't pare it down till you're ready to go on set and do the scene. It's just not easy that way. So I sometimes, if I feel a script is really overwritten, I will say no to it.
Do you find that, is there a satisfactory amount of understanding for what you read in characters that you have options to take of life with your age and experience? Or is there, sort of the empathy or the awareness coming to a character perhaps in their late 80s or early 90s? Or do you find that when you're reading these characters, it's this isn't true. It's not real. Do you find it to be true?
It's more, I think it's more, I would feel the same if I were looking at a 20 or a 30-year-old. Yeah. It just... I mean, sometimes it is age. I mean, maybe it's written as a 90-year-old, but are they acting like a 90-year-old? Yeah. But for the most part, it's just how interesting they are, what they're how they're looking at life.
What was interesting about THELMA, the woman in the film?
Oh, God. Well, the minute I read it, I knew I had to do it. And I think she's a wonderful woman. Her grit, her determination, her lack of fear. She was scared to death through this whole thing. Yeah. But she went at it, I will do this. There was just so much that intrigued me about her.
My grandfather would do the same thing when he just kind of wanted to tune out and have people think he was still listening. He would just turn his hearing aids off. So I really appreciated when your character just decided to disengage by turning off the hearing aids.
Now, see, and that was interesting because I don't have hearing aids.
Way to go.
So I didn't know all this. And so they had to explain it all to me, what we were doing. Richard understood it. I can't remember if he actually wore them or just knew, but anyway, he understood it, but I didn't really. It had to be explained to me.
What else did you learn about being 93 from this script?
That was the big thing. And that you could do a wheelie with a scooter, which I had. Yeah, because if I'd known that beforehand, I might have thought, well, I can do that. I didn't do that. Stunt lady did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard you. I've seen you talk about like the stunts and stuff in this movie, and that's obviously like worth remarking upon. But what was your first sort of impression when you read the physical parts of this script? Was there an immediate eagerness to engage with like the level of stunts that you could be doing, or was it like, I don't know, we'll see when we get there?
Well, the first thing was the scooter.
Yeah.
When I read and realized the time spent on the scooter, I thought, now that would be fun. Because I enjoyed driving a car. I enjoyed a bicycle. You know, I enjoyed this. So I just thought it's something I would like to do. And the others, I wasn't sure about.
Yeah.
The others, most of the time, and even some of the things I did, I wasn't sure, you know, until I did it.
How was it? Like, how did that feel doing them once you did them? Like that, it feels
great.
Like that's pretty cool.
It felt wonderful because everybody was like, oh my God. They were also worried about me. And, you know, I'm sure in their minds, oh, June can't do that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I did it. And it was just like, look at me, you know.
Well, I guess I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that. Like, do you encounter sort of more of that than you'd like, of people being like, oh, well, I'm sure she's not up for that?
Oh, yeah. I think as you get older that people assume they know, you know, what you are, what you're thinking, what you're doing, everything. But they don't. So.
Well, that feels like Thelma. Like that feels like what Thelma sort of in this narrative, like this is the story of a woman who I made, you know, the sort of toss off joke about the beekeeper, but this is really like, you know, you play Thelma, who is scammed by bastards over the phone who are like, your beloved grandson is in jail. If we don't get this money, we can't bail him out. So you post $50,000 to an address that you're given. And it is immediately you realize that your grandson's okay. The family gets together. It's sort of, you know, resolved at least as like, this is what this is. Well, then you set out bound and determined to get your money back. And it seems always, what I liked about it too was that it never felt like a crisis of the money. I liked that it wasn't like, well, what's going to happen if we don't get that money? It entirely revolves around the resolve of like, no, this is mine and it's right to get it back.
Right. Yeah, I love the idea that we don't feel Thelma needs the money.
Yeah.
And you never get that. That's never something that's given to you, that she needs this money and the poor thing, you know, there's never that. And I love that from the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. It's time for a quick break, but I'll be right back with more June Squibb. Then I will have one quick thing before I go at the very end about that queer horror list I wrote years and years ago at this point at Vulture. Well, we are into the 2020s now, and it's broken down by decade, which means there was some updating to do. So stick around for that.
Hello, sleepyheads. Sleeping with Celebrities is your podcast pillow pal. We talk to remarkable people about unremarkable topics, all to help you slow down your brain and drift off to sleep. For instance, we have the remarkable Neil Gaiman.
I'd always had a vague interest in live culture, food preparation.
Sleeping with Celebrities, hosted by me, John Moe, on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Night-night.
It's hard to explain what Jordan Jesse Go is about.
So I had my kids take a stab at it.
Probably weird stuff.
You talk about
jobs that are annoying. Business.
I think you probably learned your lesson after talking about business a couple of times.
Grown-up jokes that I don't understand, and there's no point in making. And all the podcasts on the way.
Subscribe to Jordan Jesse Go.
A comedy show for grown-ups.
Welcome back. It is my great pleasure today to be talking with actor June Squibb, whose new film, THELMA, hits theaters this weekend. June, who is 94, has been in the business all her life. THELMA marks June's first feature film leading role. I think an interesting thing about, it can be a tricky thing about the industry, but it can also be a really beautiful thing about the industry, which is that it has to be a very sort of multi-generational affair. Like my grandpa, when he got into his 90s, he always preferred spending time with my friends and my sister's friends because he didn't like hanging out with old people. They made him feel too old. And from what I understand about this script is that you got it via Josh Margolin, the writer-director, knows Beanie Feldstein, who you worked with in The Humans, and so she saw to it that you got, I'm going to get you the script because Josh told me about it. And it feels like a really cool opportunity to constantly be able, through your work, to be blended through communities of different ages. So there's that sharing back and forth between everyone.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I have friends. Well, Chris Colfer from Glee is a very good friend of mine. And Beanie is, from Humans. So, and I never think it's so funny because I think everybody's like, well, what do you find of interest, to them as to me? And I just, they're heaven. I love them, so what am I, of course I want to spend time with them, You're
also colleagues. You're in this, you're professional peers.
Yeah.
What is it that, are you still learning from the people around you who are in different eras in their careers? What is it that you find that is perhaps different that you see in your co-star Fred or in your former co-star Beanie that at their ages might have been different from your career, but that, I don't know, that seems like a positive or just like a change that you notice that's noteworthy?
I think, Fred, accepts his work much more casually and not as a right, but this makes sense than I ever did at his age. I think at his age it was still, oh my God, I got that, kind of thing. And I think Fred, I did this and I'm doing that, and I just think it's more, I'm an actor.
Yeah.
And this is what I do, this is it. And I think Beanie probably to the same extent, too. I mean, I think she's much more comfortable and casual at her age with her career.
Do you feel like you're at a stage where you can be comfortable and casual, or is that just not necessarily your approach?
No, I think it is.
Okay.
I think I have become more comfortable and casual. And I realize that I don't think anything really scares me anymore. I really don't. And I don't mean that I don't get nervous or I don't think about things or I don't, can I do this? I think every actor goes through this. But so if I couldn't do it, I don't think it would bother me as much as it would have when I was younger.
And I guess, and the thing I wanted to hear from you too is about tell me about the significance of firsts in later stages of your career. Because obviously, by the time you were nominated for Best Supporting Actress, you'd already had such a long and achieved career behind you. You weren't brand new. It wasn't wow, overnight sensation, June Squibb scores Academy Award nomination. But I feel like the opportunity to experience firsts as we get further into something, I find it to be very hopeful because it means that new is always still possible. And I wanted to hear from you about that.
I think that's true. And I think that's one reason I'm probably still working because I think that I will tell you something. I get bored very easily. I really do, to my detriment.
Okay.
I'm not saying that is something I'm proud of, but things I just, And I think that because I'm still working, it's still a lot of things that I'm never quite sure of, that it's more interesting, you know, and it keeps me interested. I'm not, I don't get bored.
That is part of why I feel like I've pursued a career in like media and like entertainment arts as well, is that I get to feel like I get to feel like I'm constantly getting to learn about a new thing, becoming an expert in something. And when I think of jobs where I wouldn't have that opportunity, I get they're really good, practical, stable jobs that would pay me very well and have very good benefits. And I like can't bring myself to do them.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you know yourself.
I know myself and I know I'm not practical.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, how are you with money?
I wish I was better with money. That's how I am with money.
I'm awful. I've always been awful. I will always be awful. And I don't mean I don't, you know, it's just I have no sense of it. I mean, it's not even whether you make it or not. It's just that I used to have in New York, if I had $1, I would take a cab, you know, and I would go from Midtown, Times Square down to my apartment in the Village. That you could do it on $1. But I mean, that kind of thing I would do. And people were, but June, that's the last dollar yeah. Never ever occurred to me that there was anything wrong with that.
You're like, I could have got somewhere for a nickel, but I had $1.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, why wouldn't I use my $1?
Why wouldn't I spend the whole thing?
Can I ask what your preferred indulgence is now? If it's not cab rides for $1, what is it now?
Oh, no. Books. Really? I buy books like there's no tomorrow.
Are you a collector? Yes. Is it like special editions, or are you just amass volumes of books?
I just read constantly.
Really?
And I love I've always loved reading. And so I can just buy them through Amazon as much as I want.
Do you read? I mean, I'm assuming you read everything if you're reading all the time, but like, what kind of groove are you in right now? It's like, I'm in a fantasy kick. I'm in a nonfiction kick.
Scandinavian mysteries, which is a genre all its own.
Really?
Yeah. Swedish, Norwegian, Denmark, Finnish, Icelandic, all of those sort of northern Scandinavian countries. And it's really a genre. And then some of their authors, Henning Mankell and Joe Nesbo, are really famous. And they sell beautifully over here in this country.
My wife is Swedish. I can't wait to tell her you're an enthusiast of Scandinavian mysteries.
Yes.
What are you going to get optioned? What are you going to get optioned to star in, June?
Oh, I never think of that. Isn't that funny? Because I am so used to, you know, people saying, do you want to do this or will you do this or whatever. I never think in terms of that.
I have to know, what would your ideal mystery character be? Like, what trope of a character of a mystery would be?
A cop.
You'd want to be the cop?
Yeah.
Good cop or bad cop?
No, a good cop.
Okay.
My husband used to say that if I wasn't an actor, I would be a cop. And I think it's true.
Why?
That is something I could understand and want to do.
What about you just screams law enforcement to folks that know you so well?
I want everything to be, I want justice for everything and everybody. I really do.
Well, I can see how Thelma really jumped off the page for you then.
Yeah. That was a part of it, I think.
Well, tell me about working with contemporaries. It sounds like you had a really beautiful experience working with Richard Roundtree on this film.
Oh, yeah.
What is the difference in working with folks who are veterans like you? And is there a different kind of understanding between folks when you have that kind of experience behind you?
Not really.
Okay.
I don't find that. I think it's, according to the script and the actor. I mean, Fred Heckinger in Thelma is so equipped as an actor. He really is.
His performance in the movie is so tender and so layered. He's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think that, people that saw his White Lotus just loved that. And so I think that it's not age. It's who they are and what they're doing.
Well, it sounds like, I read you talking about Richard Roundtree in this film, and you said that, like, when you I think it was around when you met him on set, like, you hugged each other and you were like, this is finally happening, even though it wasn't like something you'd been like, you hadn't been on the horn with Richard Roundtree over the years being like,
we didn't know each other.
What was that sense of inevitability?
Yeah, it was just, what I said to him was, well, it's about time. And he said, yeah. And he understood what I meant. I don't know that anybody else did in the room, but he understood what I meant.
And is that something that you would even enumerate, or was it just like, no, it's just something I understood was true?
We didn't go beyond that. That's all. I said,
really
well, it's about time. And he said, yes. And that was it. We just both knew.
Could you please share the anecdote I heard you say at the CAA screening of Thelma about on your birthday, what Richard Roundtree did?
Yes, I had a birthday during shooting, and Richard was not called that day. And my assistant had gotten everybody white wigs, so they looked like me. And everybody around the set had their white wigs on. And Richard came in his car with 24 red roses for me for my birthday, and a white wig. Put the white wig on. I have the photo of he and I with the roses and the white wig.
That's so fantastic.
Yeah.
What a beautiful day on set.
Yeah, it was. It was.
How was the experience of making Thelma for you? How was it being an action star?
Well, it was fine. They were very careful about my hours and when and how I did things. I must say that without the production being aware now or always of my age, I think it would be harder. But when they're aware, it eases everything up tremendously.
And what is I feel like it's like I want to like recognize the sort of scope of what, a role like Kate and a role like, Thelma means in your career. Like there's sort of the headline around, June Squibb and Thelma is like her first lead role in a film in all of her career. And then with Nebraska, it's obviously like, and at this age, nominated for Best Supporting Actress. And those are really important, but like, it's not. I guess I wanted to hear from you about what you find the key perspective is on the significance of those kinds of like headline achievements in the big scope of your career. Like, because I don't know if you're getting hung up on like, this is my first leading role because you've had a lot of parts in your life or like, but what do those kinds of achievements mean to you? And perhaps in the context of how they focus attention on you sort of after a lot of work.
It means I'm doing something right.
Okay.
As an actor, that I what I've decided to do for this woman is something that everybody else recognizes, and it's great. I mean, when you figure that all the many different actors and all the many different things that people could be watching. And we've already had so many people watch Thelma. It's just been amazing. I mean, Sundance blew my mind. I had no idea. I'd never been there before.
Oh, wow, fun!
I had films there, but I had never been there. And I couldn't believe it. The crowds, the wonderful feeling towards film, everything. It was great.
That was your first Sundance?
Yes.
Oh my God, congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What kinds of firsts still feel exciting to you? Like what you're like, it's been a few years and I've been building towards like what does something like in the way that like Nebraska, I don't know, perhaps it opened doors that you hadn't had open to you before. Like what do you feel like seeing the response to something like this? Like what would you like to see a door open toward? Perhaps in addition to being a cop in a Scandinavian adapted mystery thriller, like what is a door you still want to push down?
I still would love to do a Western, which I've never done. I've done a horror film, but I've never done a Western.
I love a Western.
Yeah, I do too. I grew up on them. I mean, Saturday afternoon in my little theater in Vandalia. It was wonderful. I loved it. I mean, that was my idea of film.
And you were a longtime New Yorker. Are you still bi-coastal? Do you still?
Not really. No,
Okay.
now I'm living in Los Angeles. Yeah, I lived in New York for 65 years.
Were you always in the same place?
No. I was all up and down the west side.
Okay.
From the village up as far as 103rd. And the last 30 years were on West 80th Street.
Wow.
Between Broadway and Amsterdam.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. That was really that's why we stayed there for 30 years. So that was one of, really great apartments.
I feel like Broadway is one of those that it just feels like it sits in this sort of snow globe in my mind. Like it feels like Broadway sort of sits eternal as it is. But you still do theater? Like has the way theater functions changed much over the many years you've been doing it? Or does it kind of the core of it still the same?
Well, I think the core of it is still the same, but it is so different. We never took time off.
Mm-hmm.
And now the casts have so many days a month that they can take time off, and they do.
Yeah.
And that to me was just when I first was a part of something that this was happening in, and I would, well, why would you want to not do it? I couldn't understand it. But they have a whole different attitude, towards health.
Yeah.
And the way they feel, everything. So, and I'm also amazed at the technical ability of the singers now, which is just amazing.
One of the great pleasures of my life was getting to see Audra McDonald tour a number of years ago, and just seeing her live. It's like not watching a human being. It's like me and you aren't made of the same thing, Audra McDonald. We're not the same species.
Well, it was funny to me because when I sang, I used a chest sound, but I had a high. It was almost a tenor. It was almost in the tenor range, and I really got jobs sometime because I could sing so high in my chest. And now they do it like that all the time. I mean, it's like they all just flip it off, all the time. So, and I just keep thinking, oh my God, I pushed for every one of those notes, and now they scoot them out.
Scoot them out. Well, I guess my last question to you would be with screen work being a later career of yours after so much live performance work, and with, Kate and Nebraska being such a sort of crucial point in that. What was it that you took from her in that experience going forward into more of your screen work that perhaps for you it was an internal turning point as much as other people might have recognized it in different external ways as a turning point?
I think, well, for one thing, because of the Academy Award nomination, I do not have to audition.
Nice.
That surprises you. It's like a spigot is turned, and all at once you are offered everything.
Wow.
And it was the nomination. And that, I kept thinking all those years I auditioned singing and dancing and everything. Oh, God. But that was really something for me. That and it made me feel different. It made me feel differently because I was all at once handed scripts and saying, would you do this for us? Instead of my, being in front of them trying to prove to them.
Right. Well, June, you proved it a lot longer ago than you even started doing movies. So I'm glad that 20 some odd years after you began doing movies, people finally realized that you'd already proved it still. And thank you so much for your work. And Thelma is fantastic. And I cannot wait for people to see it. I appreciate you so appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thank you so much to June Squibb. Oh my God, a radiant soul. What a chance. What an opportunity. If you're in the US, you can head out to theaters to see Thelma this weekend. It is so much fun. Please see this movie in a theater. People were like, oh no, it's the end of the summer box office because something had a soft debut recently. But then Inside Out 2 came out, and so did Bad Boys Ride or Die, and they did really well. And they're like, hey, summer's back. You know what? Go see Thelma like you would go see a Bad Boys movie. Treat Thelma like Bad Boys. Treat Thelma like the June Squibb beekeeper that it is, and go to the theaters and check this one out, please. And then also, shouts out to the Catastrophic Thirst bonus content feed we are running alongside Feeling Seen, talking about erotic thrillers with great people. We are covering the episode She's Too Young with filmmaker Sam Weinman on the next drop. Please watch that movie, then listen to this episode. It is very important as we define what it means to be an erotic thriller. You may have thought that just now was my one quick thing before I'm going, but if you'll remember back at the top of the show, it is not, because I just wanted to, it's about promoting the work that I do, because that's fun. I'm proud of the work that I do, but it's also just about promoting queer film. It's about promoting queer horror in the month of queer celebration. We are still in full swing Pride, baby. And over on Vulture back in 2018, I think, I did a list that I wanted at the time to be basically like the definitive 30,000 foot view look at the history of queer horror, which it doesn't mean it's going to be the most in-depth list of queer horror you'd ever seen. It's not like the final treatment on queer horror. It was never meant to be. It was like, if you read this list, which is broken down by queer horror by decade, like films per decade, and giving a sort of summation of what each decade offered since like the 1920s, it would kind of give you a guide to like, hey, where has this history, where have we been? Where are we now? How far have we come? How far have we yet to go? So it could just give you like a little primer on that. Well, as I did that in the teens, it has now since become the 2020s, and we are further in to those 20s. We're at halfway through, so it felt like time to update that list again. And there's now so many more movies to choose from, even in just these first 4 years of the 2020s, than there have been in so pretty much every decade prior in terms of explicit queer representation and authorship to boot. And so I would just urge you to go check out that list. It's just 61 essential queer horror movies. And check it out because my writing is good and I like it. But check it out because it's the month to honor these movies expressly. You should honor them all the time, as we always say here. Support independent cinema and support queer cinema. But, you know, guide yourself here in these 2020s to movies like Husera, The Bone Woman, if you're up for some lesbian witchery. Maybe you are a big Julia Ducournau fan like I am, and you want to do a little reflection on Titan. I won't give away all of the things that I wrote about in there, but I will say you could read about the excellent horror comedy sleigh starring a bunch of drag queens. That's something you could read about. Why don't you go check and verify it for yourself? It's always a good time, so like I said, to look back at these movies, but now is especially a good time to do it wrapped in a rainbow flag. So go check out that list. It will give you an excellent sprint toward the end of June Pride Month viewing slate that you can put together. Do movie nights every night and make it all queer horror. And that is a great note to go on any show. That is our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I am Jorcru on Twitter. That's JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows,
supported directly
by you.